So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we make a return to GRIMSLADE, albeit this is one that has been updated. I believe it was the player who sent me the replay who updated it as well, and that was Captain Gervais, I believe. But we can see that essentially it should be a little bit more stable now actually, which is interesting because the first time I loaded this replay up it did crash, so I'm a little bit concerned, to be honest with you. Cityscape maps like this are the ones that are most at risk of being a little bit unstable when it comes to recording on them, but it should be more stable than it was, to be honest with you, and this wasn't one of the main problem childs of the previous build anyway, to be honest, because you can see that back over here parts of the buildings have been replaced by something which is a little bit more user-friendly, because before you had to funnel through an incredibly narrow gap which slowed the battle to a crawl when it came to the final stand, which wasn't ideal. But also just a few other things like, you know, superfluous elements being removed and made a little bit more clean, which I think is good because it helps the defenders. It sort of makes things a lot more clear-cut as to where they're supposed to hold and not, and it doesn't, you know, it just makes things a little bit more well-rounded. But it's not a lore-friendly battle by any means today. We do have 3 good factions on the defence, but we also have several good factions on the attack, so it's a bit of a mishmash, to be honest with you, but no matter. It is still an updated version of a map, which I actually do think is very good, as long as mechanically it hasn't been made unstable by this update. Then it definitely is one that I would recommend people play on, because it's nice to defend, but it's also dynamic. It doesn't just come down to a single choke point. Like, lots of big cityscape battles do often fall into the trap of it just becoming one choke point, which is a real shame. That isn't the case with GRIMSLADE though. It can work out in multiple different ways, and it's very nice to work through. Regardless, we shall go through the attacking armies first and foremost, as we often do, starting off with awesome boss Death, who is playing as Numenor. So he's got some Belagire archers on the front here. When you're on the attack, an archer like this is very, very useful because they're not so poor that they're not going to do any damage at all, but they're not so expensive that you feel like you've overpaid for them when you're on the attack, and it's never going to be something that you can really do as much damage as you would if you were on the defence. But the Belagire archers are really, really good in a skirmish fight, really, really cost effective. And it will make Numenor's job much easier. It also allows them to be a little bit of a slower burn with Numenor, which is important because you want to save your more important stuff for later, especially if you're Numenor, because you will be one of the forces that the opponents will try to focus down if they can because of your quality. Belagire footmen are another unit you can commit early because, of course, you know, they're not really overly expensive. It's the closest thing Numenor have to a more disposable unit of like regular line infantry. They are a spear, so they are subject to the spear malus, very low attack against other infantry, but still, they're reasonably well stocked in terms of defensive stats. A mix of Numenorian cohort and Numenorian shield guard, the cohort obviously being the line infantry, really, really good base stats, particularly when it comes to the attack. It's really what sets them apart from other similar units like the Alcarondas Legion, the fact that they have attack which is a little bit better. They do have defense which is a little bit lower as well though, so do bear that in mind. Numenor are very aggressive when it comes to moving forward and using their quality, so once you're committed, you need to hope that you can do the business a little bit quicker perhaps than some of the other sort of more heavy duty factions. And the shield guard offer you a little bit of AP as well as anti-cavalry because they are armor piercing spears, a really, really potent unit against the right targets, and so it should be here because there are going to be heavily armoured factions on the defence. 3 hit points on the Pharism Swordmasters makes them the best heavy swordsman in the game, bar none really. That 3rd hit point really does make a big, big difference. It's the most significant defensive stat that I think you can add to a unit like this, because all stats of units of this calibre are going to be very high. Adding a 3rd hit point just means that you essentially have to kill them again. Gives them that extra little bit of survivability, which the others, you know, do noticeably lack in comparison to the Pharism Swordmasters. They are really very, very good, but they're very expensive as well. You know, you pay as much for them as you would for a unit of Lance Knights, and they don't do as much damage as them for sure. More Numenorian Shield Guard on the flank over here. Just in the middle, we can see there are some Seafarers of Nidamos. Again, nice javelins, not a lot of ammunition, but they can do good damage before then charging into melee and acting as good makeshift axe and shield infantry. And at the back we can see some Naran Royal Guard and some Numenorian steel bows, so some AP arrows, albeit relatively short supply, so you do have to pick your targets. And then one of the best skirmish archers in the game with their huge armour values, their shield value as well, the very heavily armoured Royal Guard. Then moving on, I think this is the next army. Yep, it's Mighty Eskimo 6, who is playing as Arthedain. He's got some Fornost Arrayed Knights. or Rhine Knights, I'm not really sure which one it is. But they are standard, heavily armoured lancers. You don't see enough of cavalry units like this. I think the meta for Reforged, they tried to make lancers like this more of an attractive proposition by buffing their armour so they don't rout so readily. The problem is, I don't think it's a matter of these units being poor, I think it's just a matter of the multiple HP cavalry being too good. And I do think that there is a case for saying that you don't need to nerf them per se. Increasing the cost of such cavalry across the board, however, to make them even more expensive than they are, would be a good idea, I think. But we will see the 4 Lothlorien Knights today, which is pretty neat. We've got some dismounted 4 Lothlorien Knights as well as the dismounted Knights of Numenor. So again, bodyguard, tier sword and board, and then some heavy swordsmen as well of the standard variety. Got some Numenor gate guards as well, should be really, really useful if they survive to the late game. Dunedain Peacekeepers, one of my favourite units in the Arthedain roster, if not my favourite, because of how useful they can be against lower defence infantry, particularly against the Orc factions. They can really mop up against the low tier stuff because of the high attack they have from the axes, and the fact they are Dunedain means their defensive skill is not compromised by their choice of weapon overly like it can be with others. And then a couple of units of Arthedain men-at-arms with the armour upgrades as well. There's probably, indeed there is, more units over here. So there's some Arthedain pikemen without the armour upgrade, so they should be careful because they could be focused down quickly. Some standard Arthedain men-at-arms as well. I say standard, they've got the breastplate upgrade, so 1 level of upgrade on them. And the Arthedain marksman on the front. I would have preferred to see the armour upgrade on the marksman, to be honest with you. I think archers like this benefited from it the most. But ultimately it doesn't make too much of a difference either way. Over on this side of the river we can see Tundra's Fox, who is playing as Isengard, my old friends from my Lothlorien campaign. We have got some half-orc spear guard with the armour upgrade as well, so they're a decent unit to just send in first. They're pretty much the only Isengard unit capable of mass pushing. All the other orc factions have got much more dedicated units for that, but Isengard kind of lack it a bit. But what they lack in that, they make up for in other ways. The Uruk-hai Raiders are more of a standard orc infantry, to be honest with you, but they're here in great numbers today. They're being backed up by the Uruk-hai Reavers as well, so a lot of the leather-clad Isengard units today going for a more numbers-focused army this from Tundra's Fox, which I actually don't disagree with here, because they are on the attack after all. They will need that disposable manpower. He's got some Bane Guard back here as well. Is this the upgrade on them? I don't know if it is. It's kind of hard to tell a lot of the time with Isengard's units, well, the half-orc units anyway. But they are a little bit more resilient than the Reavers as a result of their armour and their just defensive values overall, to be honest with you, but ultimately the differences between the two are relatively slim, to be honest. Guards of Orthanc, Nazkai and Uruk-hai Berserkers rounding off all 3 of the multiple HP Isengard infantry units. Very different roles for all of them, of course, Nazkai being the powerhouse, Berserkers being the short but sweet damage dealer, and the Guards of Orthanc being the rock. We have the catapult crew. For Isengard, of course, they are still invisible. OP exploits being utilised here. Uruk-hai archers as well in large numbers. No crossbows by the looks of things though, which is an interesting omission. We shall see if that comes back to haunt the attackers. Well, we have Mordor, played by Tweak. He's got some Olag Kai. He has got some standard Temple Executioners, which, to be honest with you, I do think I actually prefer the standard model for the Temple Executioners over the upgrade. And a lot of that has to do with, like, one of the things I did like actually about Shadow of War was this sort of helm design that they had. I thought it was pretty neat. We've got some Minas Morgul Chosen, heavy spears, Morannon Guards, standard spears, Temple Guard, AP archers, Morannon archers, we've got some Orc fodder, Morannon, Orc javelins, Morannon as well. So yeah, more numbers for Mordor, which is nice to see. Nazgul, Troll drummers, we've got some more Minas Morgul Chosen, Blackguard of Barad-dûr, a dedicated pushing unit, we shall see if they are utilised well. Some Sauron's Will and some Orc Maulers. I like the fact that Mordor have gone for a mix of quality and quantity. A lot of players who play Mordor now tend to go fully in for the quality, which is fine, but it does sort of detract from one of Mordor's main strengths, which can be the horde-like mentality that you can have while playing as them. And finally we have Lorien, played by Y2K86. We have some Lorinand archers on the front. Heavy elven archers like this are always good up close and personal and at range. So a nice multifaceted unit there as well. We've got some Kindred of Celeborn and the Watchers of the Goldenwood, so the split shots are here as well as the Silverthorns. They'll probably be saved for later because they are really Lorien's 2 best infantry units up close as well, outside of their pikemen, which of course have got very specific roles. We've got some Lorinand spears here as well, the heavy spears. Obviously Lorien only Imladris have got better armour values than Lorien among the elves. We have got some Spears of the Wood over here, who, again, this is a very, should be, anyway, for anyone who's caught the campaign, should be a very familiar look to Lothlorien's more basic units, as well as the Blades of the Wood just in behind them. And finally we have some Woodland Protectors, or at least finally of the units we can see. There's some Lorien Swordmasters over there as well, but I would imagine there's probably some Rangers here and there. Now onto the defence, starting off with the Trumpster, who's playing as Dale, so the Northman. They should be able to skirmish with Lothlorien, to be honest with you. Lorien are probably the single most scary archer faction in the game, but Dale are very, very resilient. They're probably one of the few that can withstand Lorien's damage, to be honest with you, and still come out being competitive. There's some Dalian Spears on the front line, though. They will probably struggle against all of the Lorien infantry, and if Mordor comes up here as well, the mix of quality and quantity could be really difficult for Dale to handle. But the Spearmen will make a decent line-holding unit. They're just going to need some damage in and around them. With all the best will in the world, that probably won't be the Lake Town infantry, but, you know, a mix of archers and light infantry means that they are multifaceted, at least. Some dismounted Earls of Dale. Very nice unit of heavily armoured line infantry. Armour upgraded Swordmasters of Esgaroth, so they should be able to stand up to the Elves, even if they won't beat them outright. Dismounted Earls of Dale. Dalian Paladins, whose armour piercing will be incredibly useful, especially against the Orc units. The Dalian Royal Guard are here as well. Bardian Marksmen with the armour upgrades, and Blackshot Dragon Slayers, they should be good for focusing down individual units. A large amount of Barding Herd, again, one of my favourite halberdiers in the game, because of how they make up for the standard halberdier weaknesses with their heavy armour. And that's pretty much it from what we can see from Dale. There may very well be a Thalar Rangers as well, though. We move on to Steward of Dale, who is not playing as Dale, he's playing as Dol Amroth. He's got some dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan, he's got some Perithil Champions, some Belfalas Marines, some Black Swan Renegades, obviously a nice bit of AP. We've got some Tirith Ea Marksmen as we move down into the main settlement. He has got some more Perithil Champions, some more Black Swan Renegades. The main body of his army out in the front over here, he's got some Perithil Riders, which he can use to skirmish. Yet another unit of Black Swans, which is interesting. They will actually be useful against the bulk of the Isengard force. Tarnostian Spears and Doranernal Pikes, Archers, Belfalas Marines. Got some more Tarnostians, some more dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan, as well as a lot more standard units. Dol Amroth do struggle a little bit, perhaps, to deal damage overall, but they do have Perithil Champions and Black Swans for that. We shall see how well they do. There is another unit way back over here as well, the Haven Guard, perched on top of this little manor house in the centre of the settlement. And finally, the player who sent me the battle replay, and I think who updated the map, is Captain Gervais, and he is playing as Rohan. He's got the Shield Maidens of Rohan, who I think, is this an armour upgrade for them? Or is it just a new model I haven't really seen up close? But regardless, the Shield Maidens are fantastic, whether you're on the attack or the defence, because axe throwers can really break up unshielded units very, very nicely, which is very important for what Rohan want to accomplish most of the time. Helmingas are in here, Westmark Infantry are there, we've got some Sons of Eorl, which I don't know if they're going to be able to escape this part of the settlement, we shall see. There are Red Shields in here also. Medicelled Guard, 2 units of Medicelled Guard, some Helm's Hammers, a couple of units of Westmark Marshals, and then over here up in this little encampment he's got some Westmark Spearmen, a lot of units actually over here, some Riddermark Axemen, some Helmingas, and some Riddermark Skirmishers I think I saw as well. Yes indeed, there are Riders of the Fold, the heavier Rohirrim Horse Archer, which can be a little bit of a pain to get rid of actually, interestingly enough. But I think I will make a little bit of a cut, because I'm not sure how quickly the attackers will move in. It may be a very short one indeed, but I think just to be on the safe side I will cut so that we can get right down to the action when they're moving in. So I think we are actually going to see things get underway very quickly. We haven't seen the first volleys loosed yet, but considering how aggressive here Isengard are moving forwards, we shouldn't have to wait too long here for Steward of Dale's Doranernal Archers to start opening up on the enemy. They shouldn't have too much to worry about though, especially with the armour upgrades here. The Doranernal Archers should be more than sufficient to deal with Morannons, which have been moved forward here by Mordor as well. So the forces of the two fallen Maiar here are going to be combining to attack Dol Amroth's angle. Morannon Archers are pretty good at this though, because they're not completely defenceless with regards to their own armour values, but they're certainly not expensive enough to be too concerned about when it comes to throwing them into a skirmish fight. They should be absolutely fine there. Arthedain thinking about moving in with their men-at-arms and their marksmen, but Rohan getting forward. I mean, to be fair, you can see there have been a little bit of a trade in damage, but I mean, to be honest with you, Rohan's armour piercing should give Arthedain pause and cause for concern, to be honest with you, because between the axe throwers, which can do tremendous damage to Arthedain pikemen and units of that type, all of the armour piercing, which can really make a mockery of most of Arthedain's more standard units, they're then kind of dependent upon a lot of their higher tier units, which obviously when it comes down to that, it's all about how you utilise them. Helmingast are also firing down here, who will be good in a skirmish fight. There's no real point using fire arrows at the moment, to be honest with you. You're not really going to be able to break Arthedain at this stage. Maybe later, once you've done a bit of damage to them, but not right from the start. Meanwhile, Riddermark skirmish, as you can see here, Micro perhaps been lost on the shield guard. Oof, and I think Rohan are very fortunate there, actually, because Awesome Boss Death did notice them and he did get Micro back on his units. I think maybe Captain Gervais was being a little bit too greedy there by putting his Riddermark skirmishers far too close. But going up the hill here with these spears, Rohan have got a lot to do. They need to get these Riders of the Fold out here. I said they are a resilient horse archer, and they are, but against an armour-piercing Numenorian spear unit, it's not going to go too well for them. Riddermark Axemen could trade reasonably efficiently with them, though, if they can overwhelm them. There's also the Javelins raining down on them, Helmingast offering their support, but again, Numenorian plate armour and shields getting in the way of the bulk of that damage, you would have to say. And it looks like we're going to see the first waves of an assault here. Orc Maulers and Moran on guard moving forward. The Orc Maulers actually a good choice. In most matchups, to be honest with you, cheap Orc Axemen are a really good choice to bring because that AP can be really useful and it really does add up when you've got so many in the unit. And against Dol Amroth, whose main defensive attribute is going to be that armour that they pack on, going to be a useful unit. The problem is, of course, that Dol Amroth's archers can easily pick them off, but again, Mordor have got enough manpower to burn here, and especially in loose formation like this, the Tarnostian spears are not going to enjoy being in melee with all of these foul orcs. Again, not the most impressive charge in, they're just sort of meandering into melee, but then they don't really need to. Like Dol Amroth, it's up to them to sort of organise their line a little bit more consistently here. Mordor definitely picking up the slack early in this engagement. The Orc fodder also moving in here. I'd like to see Isengard also chipping in here as well, because it's not as if Isengard have got a fully, well, they've got a much more quantity focused army. So with a few half-orcs and with a few units of Uruk-hai raiders in here, they could keep this assault going for a long time. And, you know, Dol Amroth's infantry, especially the standard stuff like the Tarnostians, you can do some damage and it will add up. And I do think Dol Amroth are probably the ones in the most danger here, to be honest with you, because I do think Rohan have got the tools necessary to cause some significant problems, especially for Arthedain, but also for Numenor. And you can see immediately here a mix of Westmark infantry and Helm's hammers. They are going to be absolutely destroying the Arthedain men-at-arms, the Helm's hammers. But even the Westmark infantry, I would say, are probably a more impressive unit than the Arthedain men-at-arms overall, which is interesting. The Westmarks have got that extra bit of defensive skill. Westmark spearmen are here. The red shields are being shot, but they are a relatively resilient unit as well. The Westmark spearmen are going to force the marksmen back, and again, I'm a little bit surprised that the marksmen came forward on their own there. Again, trying to skirmish with the horse archers, but it didn't really work out for them in the end at all. And we shall see how this goes. Meanwhile, up here, Captain Gervais, you can see that the Fornoster Rain Knights have moved in, which is perhaps why those archers were a little bit too far in. Mighty Eskimo is trying to organise his cavalry, trying to get into the Rohirrim skirmishers that are up in this little side encampment. And they have succeeded, to be fair. The Helmingast are being engaged, but the Riddermark skirmishers are here as well. And with those large axes, and the Riders of the Fold in here as well, so yeah, the Fornoster Rain Knights will fall away because they're lancers. They're not really designed for being up close and personal, whereas the Riddermark skirmishers, they are actually designed for that. They are melee cavalry in melee. Westmark spearmen and Riddermark axemen coming forward again. They're giving it their best against these upper-end Numenorian units. Numenor will take this encampment. It's just a matter of how much they lose as they do so. And I would say they're probably losing a little bit too much to be too comfortable at the moment. Westmark spearmen engaging with the Seafarers of Nindamos as well. As long as they can keep them from using their javelins, that is a bit of a bonus. Here come the Pharazim Swordmasters, who are immediately going to become the target of the Helmingast up on the hill, but it's going to take quite a lot of time for Helmingast ammunition, which is relatively standard as far as human archers go, to crack through the Pharazim Swordmasters' 3 hit points and very fine armour. Meanwhile, we go over to this side of things. Dale's still kind of waiting. Lothlorien perhaps it's to be expected that Lothlorien are taking their time, especially seeing as they're having to go up this hill on their own. They aren't able to fall back on the more disposable units of Mordor coming to their aid. So, you know, Dale will probably be quite happy with that, to be honest with you. They can just take their time over here, continue to skirmish with Lothlorien, and that plays into Dale's hands. That's definitely what they're good at, but of course what Dale gains, Dol Amroth loses, because Mordor are over here instead. To be fair though, Mordor are getting attacked pretty nicely by the Dol Amroth archers. Catapults trying to shoot over the defensive wall there. Uruk-hai raiders are moving in, so nice to see Isengard are on the scene, giving a bit of support to that initial Mordor wave, but so far, so good for Dol Amroth. They've got the dismounted knights, the Silver Swan, in melee, so that'll be buffing the morale of all the nearby units, making it harder for them to break. They've got the bit of AP that those mace men on the front line there offer the Black Swan Renegades. Ooh, and there goes a ballista from Steward of Dale, which I actually missed, and that's going to be enough to cause big morale issues on the front line here. What is going on over there? Doranonal archers are getting shot up by something. Is that the... What was shooting them just then? Must have been the Temple Guard, I suppose, which is an interesting choice of target. Dol Amroth won't be too concerned that the Temple Guard are their choice. In come the Minas Morgul Chosen, like I said though. The Black Swans will actually quite like going up against the Minas Morgul Chosen and the arriving Black Guard of Barad-dûr. But the Black Guard are resilient to arrows with their huge shield value. I don't think there's enough on the front line for them to push through though, to be honest with you. Maybe there is, but there's nothing really to take advantage of that. It would probably be a good idea for Tundra's Fox to send in another large force of Uruk-hai raiders and half-orcs at this point to try and consolidate any gains that Tweak may make here. But it's a lot of punishment here. Bardian marksmen are over here, so Dale, perhaps seeing that Lothlorien are going to take their time, is also over here lending a hand with a few of his archers. Yeah, Numenor are slowly but surely wearing this Rohirrim force down, but they haven't disgraced themselves by any means here, the Rohan infantry. Numenor are one of the scariest infantry forces you could hope to come up against. And there are quite a lot of Numenorian corpses over here. And actually, with Riddermark skirmishers coming in here, there's only 12 of them again, pulling out those axes, charging into undefended Belagire archers, so they can really rack up a decent kill count here, what remains of the Rohirrim. And actually, there are still Riders of the Fold over there. There are Helmingas. I mean, it's not actually a surefire thing that Numenor will take this hill, to be honest with you. They may have actually underestimated the Rohirrim that were up here and only sent over a portion of their army, which in the end may not be sufficient. They're being shot in the back by the Riders of the Fold here, which is going to take away their shield value. The Helmingas will have to contend with that shield value from the front, but point blank shots, they may struggle. The Helmingas are not defenceless in melee either. Again, decent little makeshift line infantry units. Seafarers are over here, which may prove to be the ultimate downfall of the Rohirrim, to be honest with you. But yeah, the rest of the Numenor forces over here. So Awesome Boss Death may have, you know, judged it just right to kill that Rohan force off, or he might have just underestimated them. We shall have to wait and see. Meanwhile, over on this side of the river, you can see over here still the Arthedain men-at-arms are fighting. I mean, they're lasting a long time in melee, to be fair, but with Helm's Hammers, it's always going to be quite difficult for them really to gain much of a foothold. And there go the Arthedain men-at-arms. Helmingas are firing. Shield Maidens is a really brutal position for Arthedain to try and assault, really. Westmark Infantry are doing really nicely against the fully upgraded Arthedain men-at-arms, albeit they are getting support from all sorts of ranged units, including axe throwers and archers up on the walls. Forward comes some Belagire footmen from Numenor to try and support their Arthedain brethren, but there are Medicel Guard over here, there are Shield Maidens, and perhaps even more worryingly for these Arthedain men-at-arms, they're in melee with Westmark Marshals. A really, really nice upper end axe infantry unit. They may not have multiple HP, but the damage they can do is significant, especially against basic units like that. Fire arrows coming in. Could be enough to break them at this point, to be honest. They are shaken. So Arthedain have made their way into the settlement, but again, Rohan I think have judged this quite well. They've got a nice killing field set up, and their ranged units and support, as we saw in the defence of the Westfold video. Rohan's support is really the key to them having a successful defence, and so far I think Captain Gervais has done a good job at that. As have Dol Amroth, to be honest with you, albeit Dol Amroth are going to have to keep this defence going for longer just because they're going to be going up against Orc factions whose entire purpose for being is being able to sustain assaults like this because of how much manpower they have. Perithil champions are on the front line, so Dol Amroth aren't messing around. They are continuing to send units to the front line. Minas Morgul Chosen will take more killing. than the other units that have been sent forward so far, but more support is going to be needed. There are guards of Orthanc back there. You can see some Uruk-hai raiders have moved in to sort of cut off any reinforcements from the side. Some of these Silver Swan Knights are being surrounded here by the fighting Uruk-hai. Uruk-hai archers are in position, and again, like, Mordor and Isengard won't be panicking at this point, because yes, they've taken losses. They haven't really gained much in the way... Ooh, those are the Kindred of Celeborn, firing into the Parathil riders and ripping through them. So Lothlorien are also sending over a little bit of support. Speaking of which, Lorien, of course, certainly don't have the same luxuries as their Orc brethren in this fight. They have to be far more careful about how they choose to engage Dale going up this hill. They have sent forward some Spears of the Wood, and now some Blades of the Wood are coming forward. This will probably be a situation that the Dalian Spearmen start to struggle in. The arrival of the Swordsmen, I think, is going to be the catalyst for that. So they're going to need some support. Will Dale give it to them? They will. Some Earls of Dale moving down. And these more light infantry examples from Lothlorien will probably struggle to crack through the really heavy armour of the Earls. But still, these kinds of units in pure melee terms can be really, really efficient for the Elves, so they won't be too worried about that so far. They are also making their way uphill in formation to try and mitigate arrow fire, which is a problem for them, even from the front. Yes, they have a shield, but they're very lightly armoured, so it is a possible problem. Woodland Protectors. Loren-armed archers are also firing in. But again, in a skirmish fight like this, Dale will want that fight. The one thing they won't want it to devolve into is a match of skill on the front line, because if that happens, Lothlorien win it every time. Spears of the Wood are here. Yeah, Loren-armed spears, I mean, that's a problem for Dale as well, because they're really tough to wear down, and because they're elves, even though they do have the spear malice applied to them, it doesn't really affect them that much, because their stats are high enough to sort of offset that. But it is worth saying that a lot of Lorien's more dangerous units have actually been sent over here to sort of act as a supporting role for this big Orc push. Both of their high tier archers, there was also the Swordmasters as well that we went overhead on. This is a real problem though. That ballista and those fire arrows are going to be causing havoc among the Orc ranks. A big unit of Orc javelins is retreating as we make our way across to this side of the river once again, where Rohan are the sole defenders. You can see that they continue to push back. And the more they just send regular Arthedain men-at-arms up against the Helm's Hammers, the more Arthedain are going to lose. Dunaim shadow bows are moving in, so Rangers, Wardens of the North, armour-piercing arrows. So they are starting to turn the screw a little bit. Some of the more dangerous skirmishers that both Numenor and Arthedain have at their disposal now moving in. And with Numenorian cohorts on the front line, all of a sudden the Westmark infantry and Helmingast are looking decidedly average by comparison. So the heat is being turned up on Rohan here. And did they use up too much of their supporting ammunition too soon, would be the question. There are some Parathil champions over here as well, interestingly enough. And some Black Swans, so Dol Amroth are over here with some support for Rohan. The red shields are firing in, using up their ammunition now. 4 Arthedain Knights and a Numinous Gate Guards, both unshielded, so certainly not the worst targets, albeit the armour will mean that these Arthedain soldiers don't fall in droves. Some Dunedain Peacekeepers back here. They're a little bit scattered though, a little bit all over the place. They have managed to push through, which is a good sign. Medicel Guard firing into the side of those 4 Arthedain Knights there. Big damage, they're also shaken. And Medicel Guard, of course, once they're out of ammunition, are a very tough infantry unit to bring down as well. The King's Guard of the Golden Hall, definitely earning their keep there. There's another unit of Medicel Guard on the front line already, actually. I was always a big fan as well about how the Medicel Guard have got like a mix of swords and axes as their weapons as well. And they're going up against the Dunedain Peacekeepers and Knights of Numenor. I mean, with support they'll be fine, but without support, the more dedicated infantry of Arthedain will probably start to gain the upper hand. But you can see Rohan, they have been forced back. I mean, what's going on up in this encampment over here? Helmingast, defeat is almost a certainty. There are still Riders of the Fold who have been sort of skirmishing around. Still they're fighting over here though, Rohan. Again, it's been pretty clear for a little while at this point that Rohan will ultimately lose, but I don't know if they will. I mean, they could abandon this area, to be honest with you, and just get out of here with the Riders of the Fold. I mean, with Nara and Iron Royal Guard here, the charges that this cavalry offers is not really going to be all that important, and who knows, maybe some cavalry in behind the enemy lines will cause some disruption down here on the low ground. So few more units here. Numenorian steel bows on the way forward. And yeah, I would say the attackers, while they have taken losses on both sides of the river, they don't need to be too worried at this point. They have enough in reserve. This is a concern. The catapult firing in point blank, right into the Bardian marksman. They get some friendly fire as well, which I think was enough to cause some routing. But Dale have arrived on the front line to support Dol Amroth as well, much as how Dol Amroth has sent some units across the other side. Some Barding Herd and some Bardian marksmen trying to shore things up as the half-orcs arrive. That ballista has been in an absolutely brutal position though, and Lorien Swordmasters on the way forward. But yeah, Dol Amroth have definitely got their money's worth off their ballista, and all of the archers around here have also been having a thoroughly enjoyable time of it. What have we got over there? Keldon River Patrol are being engaged by the Olakai, who were pushed in here. But there isn't many of them left, and I think that's testament to the fact that there are Black Swans over here, so it was always going to be a bold move to send units like that in. Belfalas Marines throwing their javelins in to a nice area, but Isengard is starting to surge in now. Gaps are being found, Half-Orc Spearguard are charging through said gaps, and this could be a problem. If this defence starts to get overloaded, there are still plenty of reserves back here. That's the beauty of having Isengard builds such as this, where you focus more on the half-orcs and the more regular units of raiders. Watchers of the Goldenwood are firing up into the air. They don't really have a good angle. They are still hitting the Belfalas Marines, so they will still get a lot of kills, but I don't know, I'd probably save that ammunition for later. The Silver Thorns can be so good. They are getting a better shot now onto the Black Swan Renegades, which is good. Meanwhile, a really grindy fight going uphill here for Lothlorien with Dale. As you can see, the Swordmasters of Esgaroth adding themselves to the front line. One of Dale's better choices for trying to face elven foes such as this. But part of the problem Lothlorien may have here is they are having to go up against a phalanx unit, the Barding Herd. The armour piercing will be something that will be quite useful against stuff like the Lorenarn units. The Keren Amroth Staffmasters are moving forward, who are very low attack but very high melee defence units. They're like the closest thing in the game to a melee tar pit, really. They take so long to kill when you're in melee with them. You can obviously shoot them up and their armour isn't particularly fantastic, so that's the way you want to do it under normal circumstances, but I don't think that's what Dale are going to be able to do here, considering the angles. Woodland Protectors are still there. Lorien still have stuff in reserve as well though, even if it is more basic elements of their army. They are still putting the pressure on, although I think Dale will be fine over here for the time being. But we shall keep that in mind as we swing back around. This is the little new bits to the settlement. I'm not sure why this was added, to be honest, because you're never going to see the outside of GRIMSLADE really utilised unless there's some sort of scenario that's made where there's like a force that's cut off in there. But outside of that, there's also a little area over there in the corner as well. It's one of those examples of a map that has a lot of detail to it, but much of it will never get seen. But fair play to Gervais, because he's clearly put some good effort in. The raiders biding their time and waiting. Watchers of the Goldenwood have got their blades out, but they're actually retreating now, and I think retreat is going to be the name of the game. I think Dol Amroth and Dale should probably retreat up there at this point, because Isengard are flooding in. Dol Amroth's support for Rohan on the other side of the river has actually turned back around now, and the Perithil champions are over here. Meanwhile, some of it anyways, there's still some Black Swans over here, adding even more AP against the Numenorian, or the line of Numenor factions. Dunedain Rangers are over here who have got their swords out, so they must have been shooting. There's one Westmark Marshal who is eager for blood, and he manages to bisect one of those poor Rangers. Westmark Marshals are on the front line. Rangers, though, not really the best choice of target for them, although it's probably not their choice after all. But Rangers not really known for their high armour values. What have we here? Numenorian steel bows using their AP arrows, trying to whittle down the Black Swan Renegades that came to Rohan's aid. The Sons of Yorl are over here. A little bit of damage sustained, but not too much. They've got a good opportunity to charge here into the back of the Dunedain Rangers. This should be fairly hefty. It wasn't in the end. The charge didn't really connect. They just sort of bumped into them once again. It seems to be a bit of a trend lately with people utilising their cavalry. Warns of the North and steel bows firing in, and as the Sons of Yorl retreat, they're getting pinged in the back by those AP arrows. You can see over here though, still, I imagine these Helm's Hammers have probably racked up a very impressive kill count for themselves. They're finally being whittled down, but it's just been constantly up against Arthedain Men-at-Arms, which are a unit they're going to be good against. And the engagement started over here a lot, well, most, to be honest with you, of the units that are dead on the floor here are Arthedain. There are a few green capes as well, but most of that Numenorian. Perithal champions did come back across the river. Guards of Orthanc are a little bit depleted. Uruk-hai archers are going to be shooting point blank. Unshielded unit as well, so a good choice, even if the Uruk-hai archers are not really all that impressive. The Perithal champions, they're in melee. I mean, the Guards of Orthanc are not really the most aggressive unit, as depleted as they are as well. They're going to need some support to really deal with these Dol Amrothian heavy swordsmen, and it looks like they will get it. There's some heavy axemen on the way, some Uruk-hai reavers, and they are charging in. And off the charge they will get a few kills there. AP will always be useful as well, so yeah, you can see that Dol Amroth have pulled back just a bit. Some Athala Rangers who were firing in, they are now on the front line. They'll struggle against Swordmasters, but with the support of the dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan, they should be okay. The Kindred are firing in up here. Dalian Royal Guard, I mean, the Ballista has already done such heavy damage, and it still has more to give. A lot of this ammunition from the Dalian Royal Guard sadly being wasted, but yeah, most of it, the vast majority. Some Rohirrim forces back here as well, which is quite interesting. So they had some units in reserve, but they're now having to go up against their old enemy Isengard as the half-orc Bane Guard continue to push forwards. There's some Medisailed Guard back here as well as some more Shield Maidens, so a lot of them are skirmishers, whether they're out of ammo or not. The Medisailed Guard still have a bit of ammunition. Can't afford to be too choosy. I mean, the Bane Guard aren't the worst of targets, and you could break them up pretty quickly with just a single volley. One of these two units probably should use their ammunition anyway. Javelins being utilised on the Temple Guard, so that's a nice choice, but they're going to get out of range pretty quickly, and now they're going to have... Ooh. I didn't realise this was actually... I didn't realise shenanigans were afoot up here. Moran Guard victory seems certain against the Haven Guard. I thought that looked a little bit odd, but it's because the Nazgul are up here as well. Nazgul operating in their preferred environment, surrounded by some meat shields, and with the Temple Guard on the way up here as well. Things are looking pretty dicey actually for the Haven Guard, you'd have to say. It's not exactly the position they would want to be in. There is elven influence in the Haven Guard army, you can see it, and I like that. Half elven blood in Dol Amroth. Bane Guard are up there. Well, I mean, going up that way is going to have to wait until they have enough strength to send that way. Adunaim Shadow Bows over on the other side of the river, which is going to be real bad news over here. The Ballista, however, is shooting into the back of the Bane Guard. There's actually some arrows as well. I think that is from the Black Shots as well. So, I mean, yeah, the Bane Guard, a Ballista and Black Shot Dragon Slayers firing into the back of all these half-orcs. I think it's too late to save these Rohirrim units anyway, considering that there are still shenanigans afoot over on this side of the river. But the Sons of Yorl are getting in the way. They do manage to interrupt the forward march of the Shadow Bows. Nice to have this unit of knights still operational on the field, because it does give the attackers something to think about as they move through. There are Reavers, but they're getting grilled. Well, let's go back over here and see what is up. There goes Mordor's general. One of the Nazgul killed by one of the Haven Guard, and following shortly behind is Imrahil. I was going to say, it looked like the Haven Guard were literally on their last legs anyway, but they do manage to spit in the eye of Mordor one last time by killing their general off. It does go to show how resilient the Haven Guard really are, though, and their quality. There are Nazgul, Moran Guard and Temple Guard up here, and yet they're still getting kills, they're still contributing to their team. But as we go off down here, the Troll Drummers waddling around doing their thing. They love it. Troll Drummers, they just have a good time when they go to a battlefield banging away on their drums. Uruk-hai archers being added to the front line. Yeah, this is a front line which is definitely a losing proposition for the attackers so far, as we are now into the final 10k frames actually. We shall see if that continues to be the case as the battle wears on, as there's a stream of fire arrows going into those Uruk-hai raiders, but there are simply too many, I think. Yeah, shield maidens are broken, Pharazim Swordmasters are on their way over. Sons of Yorl, though, do manage to get a charge off into the Pharazim Swordmasters, do manage to get a couple of kills as well. Not the worst idea, because they can be so devastating in a blob fight if it gets to that point later on, which I'm sure it will. What remains, there's one red shield left. There's a few Medicel Guard who are trying to finish off the guards of Orthanc. I mean, they've managed to make it quite a long way, the Medicel Guard, but they're biting off far more than they can chew here. They've gotten into Berserkers and Watchers of the Golden Wood. I mean, they'll be able to get in the way if the attackers advance, but little else. As much as I rate the Medicel Guard, they aren't this good. I don't think any infantry unit is, to be honest. Meanwhile, slowly but surely you have to say that the quality of the heavier Elven units is shining through, as the Dalian front line continues to look thinner and thinner, and especially when you look at it and it contains more and more Lake Town units. They're the kind of thing that are not going to be sufficient for dealing with elves. There goes Theoden. Captain Gervais's general falls. Illidan. Dismounted elves. I mean, just having a look at what they'll have left. They have the paladins, but I mean, the paladins aren't really well suited for Lothlorien. They do have some heavier units, but it's not as if they've got a really obvious target to go up against over here. To be honest, most of Lothlorien's really heavy stuff is actually over on this side of things anyway. But they need reinforcements over there, because if they don't have anything, they could end up falling by the wayside pretty soon. Dismounted Knights of Silver Swan and Dalian Royal Guard fighting hard on the front line, and they will be victorious over here, even if they're also going to take a fair amount of damage here from the very scary Kindred of Celeborn. I really like the detail on the Kindred of Celeborn. Excellent. What have we got here? Nazkai biding their time and waiting. Watchers of the Goldenwood are being hit by those fire arrows. Interesting choice. I mean, you could argue the Berserkers might be the better choice there, because you're more likely to get some good kills, and they're still very, very dangerous if left to their own devices in melee. There are still a few Rohirrim units over on this side of the river, but little more than stragglers, you'd have to say. The remnants of Westmark Marshals, Shield Maidens and Helm's Hammers, which again, not the most defenceless units, but all they're going to be able to do is just make sure that a few more of these units won't make it for the final push. I think the attackers are in a good position here, to be honest with you, going into the final phases of this fight, just because I think the quality units they have are still in high enough numbers. I don't think the defenders will be able to come out the other side of this one. These Earls will of course relatively easily defeat stuff like Marksmen and Uruk-hai archers in melee. That isn't really the problem though. The problem is going to arise when the Nazkai, Watchers of the Goldenwood, Kindred of Celeborn, Berserkers, that kind of unit gets into melee. They've got the Paladins still, they've got the Black Shots, but that's pretty much it with regards to sort of really high-end stuff. Surround that with the Earls and you might have a force capable of holding on, but we shall have to wait and see. As the dismounted Earls of Dale get ready to push forwards. Karen Amroth Staffmasters, Woodland Protectors, or at least I think they're getting ready to push forwards. The choice needs to be made fairly quickly here, because Lorien, without any more reinforcements here, Dale will ultimately lose this fight, I think. Narrowly, but they will. With the addition of those Earls, they might just win it, but that's obviously a unit of Earls that they cannot then send over here, which the situation over on this side of the field is probably more dire, if we're being honest. Bardi and Marksmen still have a bit of ammo. Nice unit to have late on, because they are good when it comes to dealing damage, but also they can do a decent job in melee. Perhaps they need more than decent at this point though, especially when you see Nazgul and Pharazim Swordmasters starting to put pressure on your lines. I think it might be a bridge too far for the defenders to go on to win this battle, if I'm being brutally honest. But never say never. One of the defending armies has fallen away completely, and that must be Dol Amroth. Dale's still holding on down here. The Dalian Royal Guard are a very strong unit, but of the two, the Watchers of the Goldenwood are going to be slightly better. They do need to get into melee a little bit better than they're currently doing. Right, what are Rohan doing? Because I think over here is really the only force they still have remaining. I mean, they're still fighting, to give them their credit. I mean, this is really the only way in which Rohan is contributing at this stage, I think, unless this is the Sons of Eorl, and it isn't, it's a routing unit, so yeah, it is basically Dale against the world at this point. And I think the world is going to be too much for Dale, so I think what they're going to try and do is maybe try and crush Lorien quickly, but that is much easier said than done. I mean, Lothlorien archers are going to be able to defend themselves nicely in melee, and there's over 150 of them. There's still a full unit really of Blades of the Wood. They've got some javelin support. They do need to get into these javelins pretty quickly, otherwise it's going to continue to be a painful experience for them. Very nice. And then over here though, yeah, I just don't think the quality is quite there. The black shots, do they still have ammo? Credit to the Earls, they're still holding the line. The Bardian and Marksmen are on the front line as well, doing their thing. If they still have some ammunition, so I can get my words out. If they still have some ammunition, then maybe Pharazim Swordmasters could start to fall away, but again, look at this. Temple Guard, Uruk-hai Berserkers, Troll Drummers doing their thing. It's going to be difficult, isn't it? I mean, black shots, what are they firing at now? Something over here, apparently. Wardens of the North. Not the worst target, but you need to be doing something to that infantry blob. It says defeat is a distinct possibility, but I wouldn't believe that, really. With 34 Swordmasters there, and with the Nazgul, and with Berserkers, I think the game may very well be lying to you. And certainly over here, with the Elven units in full flow, there go the Dalian Royal Guard. I'd be very surprised if Dale was able to pull something out of the hat here. Unless he has a whole bunch of hidden units. We've already seen the Athala Rangers used. Here are the Earls. They are going to get in the way, presumably, of the Nazkai and the Lothlorien stuff. Probably the scarier force, actually, with the Elven defensive abilities, the Nazkai's attack. And no, they don't have ammunition, so the black shots are getting into melee, and I think with that we can safely assume, safely infer, that the ultimate victor of this fight is probably going to be the attackers. And this is what happens when you can combine the strengths of races like the Elves, the Orcs, the Numenorians, men. It can be so difficult. The Earls have pushed their way all the way down here to try and interrupt the archers, but in so doing they've obviously cut themselves off as well. Blades of the Wood on one side, Loren-armed archers on the other. And as resilient as the Earls are in that heavy armour that they wear, they are not going to be walking away from this one, I would expect. And up here, I mean, it's a very dense Dale formation, which is why Lothlorien haven't broken through, really. Lots of spears in formation, Lake Towns in there to offer a meat shield, the Earls and Paladins with the heavy armour, the Barding Herd with the Phalanx. So to be fair, this position over here for Dale is pretty decent, but it's going to be over on the other side where things go wrong. Down here. So yeah, the Earls are trying to hold the line, but trying is going to be the operative word. The Nazkai, especially with their armour piercing, are like the worst nightmare for the Earls. To pinpoint where it went wrong, I don't know. I think the varying strengths of all the attackers meshed very well together. Lots of damage was done early, but I do actually think one of the things the defenders could have done was pace themselves with their skirmishes a little bit more. Rohan especially, I think, dumped a lot of their ammo very quickly, which obviously meant early they did horrendous damage to Arthedain, but in the end it started to turn against them, the fight, and they couldn't really respond then. Arthedain just sent forward their basic stuff first, and then as soon as Arthedain's serious units and Numenor came in, they didn't have enough ammo left to deal with things over there. And from there on, things started to fall apart, really, because the same sort of thing happened over here. Lothlorien support units came in through with the Orcs after a period of Dol Amroth doing a lot of damage to them. They just didn't have the staying power to keep going. And over on this end, Dale still stand, because they were sort of always intended to play this role, and they're back and forth with Lothlorien. This has probably been the most even fight on the field, to be honest with you, and in the end, Dale might actually end up winning this fight against Lothlorien on this hill, but it will be a victory that I think will end up being in vain. And again, Dale, good at skirmishing, good at a grindy engagement. The things that Lothlorien are maybe less happy about engaging with as they move in with more Blades of the Wood. And yeah, this dense formation has worked for them, to be honest with you, but the Earls back down here were cleaned up. And now, of course, they can start firing away with their Loren-armed archers again, offering more in the way of support. Let's see here. Still some earls back down here, are there? Nope, he must have died. The last one must have perished. What have we here? I am impressed the fact that the earls are actually still holding on. I mean, this is one of the scariest combined forces you could be up against, really. Nazkai, Kindred of Celeborn, Watchers of Goldenwood. Individually, they're all superior to the Earls of Dale. Put together, you'll scarcely find a more one-sided fight. And the armour piercing of the Nazkai really just adds to that. But they've held on, to be fair to them. And if there's one thing Dale is pretty good at, it's being a tough nut to crack. The Troll Drummers are in here. Interesting choice of committal, because the Blackshot Dragon Slayers in melee will make a mockery of the Troll Drummers, to be honest with you. And, you know, as far as the attackers go, they actually don't have all that much left. There's a couple of units down there for more some boss death, but that's really all that remains in reserve. As for over here, most of what they have left is their upper end units, in all fairness, which is going to be enough to give them the victory, but it's not going to be a massive discrepancy between the two sides in terms of what's left when all is said and done. Dale's general falls, but they're going to keep fighting for a little while longer yet, just based on the frames. And yeah, there go the Earls. Did they actually manage to kill any Nazkai? Would be an interesting question. We can try and have a little look for Nazkai bodies, and it doesn't look like they did they? Oh no, I do see an Uruk-hai helmet there. So I guess maybe they killed one Nazkai on. Goes to show how poor that matchup is for them, but I mean, in all fairness, the Nazkai are just full stop one of the scarier units of bodyguard infantry in the game. I think a lot of people tend to discount them as well. I mean, they are effectively they're more of a heavy axe bodyguard than anything else because of their AP focus, so they're not really something comparable to stuff like the Pharazim Swordmasters or Noldorin Blade Masters or even Temple Executioners. You have to compare them to different stuff like the Tharbad Warhammers and the Witch Realm Hammer Guard and Enslavers, and to be fair, amongst that company I think there's a very real case for saying the Nazkai are the strongest of them all. A very, very scary thing that Isengard have at their disposal, to be sure. Meanwhile, yeah, I mean, Dale, they are pushing down the hill, they are doing their thing. Lorien archers, defeat seems certain. With the paladins here, Dale will probably end up being victorious, but they aren't going to be victorious when the reinforcements arrive. And the Lorien archers will go down swinging, especially against stuff like Dalian spearmen. They will take pretty heavy casualties at the hands of the heavy elven archers. But the AP will be useful against the I don't know, would you call that fluted armour? Perhaps you could. But either way, it's armour, so the paladins are going to be good against it. Another very fine AP bodyguard unit. And yeah, you can see over here, victory. Not much left though, is there really? Just a few trolls. To be fair, the Pharazim Swordmasters, only 3 of them left, so they took some damage on that front line from the Black Shots and from the Earls. Temple Guard, yeah, not much left at all. It is interesting to note really that a lot of what is left over here is the Orc stuff. I think as well, the Kindred and the Watchers are still here. I mean, there's only 13 Watchers to be fair. Ooh, Kindred of Celeborn still got ammunition. And that is going to be brutal and cruel. But Lorien going to claim revenge on Dale for essentially getting in their way this whole match. And now they are going to be the ones to finally bring about the end of this battle. But nice. Again, minor additions to GRIMSLADE, I think, but it just cleans things up. I particularly like that at the back, because that at the back was a real problem for GRIMSLADE in the past, because it really had the potential anyway to really slow things down. I think there's some changes made there as well. Just things have been made a little bit cleaner, which for gameplay purposes is going to be better. So good work there from Captain Gervais, I would say, and it's nice to see the map in action. It's a relative, well, compared to a lot of other maps, it's relatively new. I mean, it's probably about 9 or 10 months old at this point since we saw the first version of it. But it's definitely a good map, a good cityscape. Only shown it a couple of times before as well, so it's not one that's gotten too old yet, especially with a few updates coming to it. Dalian Paladins in melee, they are actually going to swallow these Watchers of the Goldenwood Hole. I think actually, no. Earls are routing, so the Earls are off, but the Paladins still doing their thing. Dalian Spearmen and Lothlorien Archers fighting one another to a standstill, albeit that won't be for too long, because with those split shots coming in, the Dalian Spearmen do indeed break. And so that leaves just the one unit remaining, and it is the Paladins. Still 3 Nazgul left, Temple Guard coming in, Wardens of the North. Point blank shots actually killing the Nazgul, amusingly enough. Really just pouring everything onto the Dalian Paladins, but they're fighting hard with their great maces, but with all of that coming in, I think that will be the end. But yeah, 5% the difference, so it does go to show it was competitive throughout, but I do think that there was a very real sense that after the initial flurry of kills, very well played, Isengard with some left, Lothlorien as well, Mordor with a very limited amount left, but Numenor with pretty much nothing. Arthedain again, I think all of the attacking armies had at least like one dude left, but Isengard were definitely the ones with the most. But like I said, after that initial flurry of ranged damage from the defenders rather, following on from that, I always kind of felt as though the attackers had the upper hand in this one. I think they just handled themselves quite well, and I think the defenders just used a little bit too much of their ammo a little bit too quickly. It's all well and good when you're forced to do that. I think especially with Isengard and Mordor putting in their mass pushing units and having a lot of pressure on the line, I think Dol Amroth had relatively little choice. Rohan, however, I think did have more choice. And yes, they got a ton of kills, Rohan, but it's all about pacing yourself when it comes to using your ammunition like that. Dale, to be fair, Dale's ammo conservation was somewhat of a different matter, because for the most part they were engaged in sort of a long, sort of drawn out fight with Lothlorien. They did send over some support for Dol Amroth as well. There's a case for saying though that they should have sent a couple of Bardian marksmen all the way over to try and help Rohan out, and that could have made the difference as well. But coulda, shoulda, woulda is the saying that comes to mind there. Ultimately, I do think the attackers were good value for their win here, which, to be fair, when you're dealing with this array of factions and they've got such different strengths and they complement one another by doing that, I think you're always in a good position to go on to win against a team like this, whose strengths are relatively similar. I think it is kind of a gradient, really. You've got sort of cavalry and damage, cavalry and survivability, survivability and archers. So they've all got sort of there's a common thread connecting all of them, really. Can't believe they disrespect me like this. I don't know if you can hear that rumbling outside, but no matter. Regardless, let's have a look at the kills right now. Medicell Guard doing their thing. Helm's Hammers as well. Lots of good damage there coming off of the AP, but the Helmingast doing well. I mean, the Helmingast are the unit that I would say you should have used right from the start, because the more lightly armoured stuff, the lower tier stuff, would be more easily killed. Shield Maidens, on the other hand, yes, a lot of kills. Using them all at once, I'm not so sure. Yeah, a mixed bag. I mean, there's a lot of good kills. You can't really complain too much, but when you're talking about a 5v3, even if you play and get a lot of kills and you play well, sometimes it can come down to the overall decisions that you make, whether or not you have a chance at winning or not. And on this occasion, I do think that was the case for the defenders. It was always going to be difficult, though. GRIMSLADE is one of those where you can be so disparate as the defenders that when one of you falls apart, things can go south for you very quickly, because it's not so easy to come to your aid. And Rohan were the ones that were on the short end of that, really, because at least Dol Amroth and Dale were close enough that they could help each other more easily, whereas Rohan only had the support of a few Dol Amroth infantry units, and that was already when things were already starting to go south. But big thank you for Captain Gervais for sending this one in and for updating GRIMSLADE. I'm very happy to show off people's work as always. And big thank you to all of the players for being a part of yet another good quality battle replay. As for what's coming next, I think the next battle replay that's going to be shown, again, I'm a little bit far out, like I said, at this point. We're sort of just, I'm quite far. These will be released like sort of later on. I'm trying to record in bulk now, so I've got a little bit of a stockpile up for when university starts, so that if the schedule does get a little bit mad early on, at least my schedule won't change with regards to the pre-recorded uploads. So this is still a little bit far out, but I do know that the next battle replay I'm going to do is another one that isn't lore-friendly, unfortunately for those of you that like that sort of thing, exclusively. But it is a battle on the Iron Hills, which should be quite good. And there is a kind of a theme that I can come up with, but it's not a lore-friendly theme by any means. But yeah, that was sent to me by Vlasov. I think that will be the next one that I will be doing. But do remember that I'm always on the lookout for more battle replays, especially sort of larger battles such as this, good quality ones. But also, you know, obviously lore friendly obviously helps, but it's not a necessity, as this battle I think does showcase. But yeah, obviously as well, 2 streams per week, but at this point, at the time I'm recording this, I'm so far behind when this one will come out later on in the month that I can't really offer exact days because I don't know when they'll be. So keep an eye on the YouTube community tab for when I post messages up for when I'm going to be streaming, because that is the best way to find out. But yeah, I mean, there will also be, I think, a couple of announcements that probably would have already come out before this video is published. So, you know, again, keep an eye out for that. The exact content of which there's stuff going to be sort of happening in the coming month or so, you know, and the best way to figure that to find out what's going to be happening with regards to that is to have a look on the community tab on YouTube when I post up messages, because it allows me to be more topical, and I don't have to know what's happening weeks and months in advance like I might have to when I'm making these pre-records. It's the best way for doing things, really. So yeah, once again, big thank you to all the players involved in this battle replay. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.